We talked about how the autonomic nervous system has a preganglionic fiber and a postganglionic fiber, and those postganglionic fibers secrete norepinephrine or acetylcholine, and that effect can be stimulatory depending on what receptors are on those effector cell. So we'll get into the details of neurotransmitters in this talk. Cholinergic fibers release the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. So all autonomic nervous system preganglionic axons are cholinergic fibers. And then all parasympathetic postganglionic axons, so the parasympathetic division, that resting and digesting division, they're all postganglionic axons. Adrenergic neurons release the neurotransmitter norepinephrine, and most sympathetic postganglionic axons are adrenergic. There's a few exceptions to some sympathetic postganglionic fibers secrete acetylcholine at sweat glands and some blood vessels in skeletal muscles. So this is just the same picture showing you that norepinephrine or acetylcholine secreted by the postganglionic fiber can, in the sympathetic or parasympathetic systems, can have stimulatory or inhibitory effect. Well, what I want to point out here is that this shows you that the parasympathetic fibers only secrete acetylcholine at that from that postganglionic fiber, and for the most part the sympathetic nervous system only secretes norepinephrine. So cholinergic receptors for acetylcholine, adrenergic receptors for norepinephrine. There's two types of receptors on this would be on an effector cell membrane that can bind acetylcholine. One is the nicotinic receptor, and two is the muscarinic. These are named after drugs that experimentally bind to them and mimic acetylcholine effects, such as nicotine. And nicotinic receptors are found on the end plates of skeletal muscle cells. We know that because they cause ACH causes a stimulatory effect on skeletal muscle cells. They're also found on all ganglionic neurons, sympathetic and parasympathetic, and on hormone-producing cells of the adrenal medulla. The effect of acetylcholine at nicotinic receptors is stimulatory. So muscarinic effectors are found on all effector cells stimulated by postganglionic cholinergic fibers, and in contrast to nicotinic receptors, these can be either inhibitory or excitatory, and it depends on there's different subtypes of muscarinic receptors. It depends on the receptor subtype at the target organ. And your book tells you, has a table that talks about the different receptor subtypes and the different drugs that can bind to those subtypes and cause inhibitory or excitatory effects. Likewise, norepinephrine can bind to two different types of adrenergic receptors, the alpha or the beta, and there's even subtypes of those. The effects of norepinephrine depends on which subclass of receptor predominates on that target organ. So knowing the locations of cholinergic and adrenergic receptor subtypes allows specific drugs to be prescribed to obtain desired inhibitory or stimulatory effects on target organs. For example, atropine, we talked about atropine before. Atropine is an anticholinergic, so it blocks muscarinic receptors, and it's used to prevent salivation during surgery, dilate pupils for examination. Neostigmine inhibits acetylcholinesterase, so it inhibits the enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine at the neuromuscular junction, and this is used to treat myasthenia gravis. And then over-the-counter drugs for colds, allergies, and nasal congestion stimulate alpha-adrenergic receptors, and beta blockers, drugs that attach to beta 2 subtype adrenergic receptors, and these dilate the bronchioles in asthmatics. So most visceral organs have dual innervation, meaning they're innervated by both the sympathetic parts and the parasympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system. These two dynamic systems balance each other. So this dynamic antagonism allows for precise control of visceral activity. Sympathetic division increases heart rate, respiratory rate, and inhibits digestion and elimination. So this is the fight or flight, get ramped up division of the autonomic nervous system. And the parasympathetic division is the rest and digest part of the autonomic nervous system. This decreases heart and respiratory rates and allows for digestion and the discarding of wastes. The sympathetic division increases heart rate, dilates the airways, inhibits digestion and elimination while the body is under stress, and then after the stress has passed, the parasympathetic division returns the heart rate, airway diameters to normal, and allows digestion and elimination to return. Sympathetic tone is something that occurs throughout the vascular system, and it allows the firing rate of sympathetic neurons to control the diameter of blood vessels. So even at rest, sympathetic tone controls blood pressure, and this firing of sympathetic neurons keeps blood vessels in a continual state of partial constriction so that we can maintain our blood pressure. Parasympathetic tone is just the normal firing of parasympathetic neurons, and it's usually dominant in the heart and smooth muscles of the digestive and urinary tracts, and it acts to slow down the heart, maintain normal homeostatic levels of function unless it's overridden by the sympathetic system. So it slows the heart towards normal resting pace and dictates normal activity levels of digestive and urinary tracts. Drugs that block parasympathetic responses can increase your heart rate and block fecal and urinary retention. So there are regions of the body where the divisions of the autonomic nervous system work together rather than antagonistically, and one of these is sexual arousal. And this is best seen in the control of the external genitalia during sexual arousal. The parasympathetic fibers cause vasodilation, or blood vessels to open up, that are responsible for the erection of the penis or the clitoris. And then in orgasm, the sympathetic fibers cause ejaculation of semen in males and a reflex contraction of the female vagina. You can't have that full sexual cycle from arousal to orgasm without cooperation of both the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic system has a couple unique roles in the adrenal medulla, sweat gland, erector pili muscles, and kidneys, and a lot of blood vessels receive only sympathetic fibers. So they're responsible for that sympathetic tone of the blood vessels, secretion of of epinephrine and norepinephrine from the adrenal medulla, secretion of sweat from sweat glands, and contraction of those erector pili muscles. The sympathetic division controls thermoregulatory responses to heat and the release of renin from the kidneys. We'll get into what renin does in 206. And then it also has a lot of impact on the metabolism of the body. It increases the metabolic rates of cells, it raises blood glucose levels, and it mobilizes fats for use as fuels. The parasympathetic division usually has short-lived, highly localized control over its effectors. So they're short-lived and pretty fast. The sympathetic division has long-lasting body-wide effects. Okay, so the autonomic nervous system is controlled by various structures of the brain for the most part. The brain stem seems to exert the most direct influence over autonomic functions. It regulates pupil size, respiration rate, heart, blood pressure, some swallowing, among other things. And then our higher up centers, our hypothalamus, is the overall integration, is involved in overall integration of the autonomic nervous system. It's basically the boss, and it's the main integration center for a lot of the input coming in from sensory neurons, and then integrating that information and causing effects. We do appear to have some cortical, so out here, or voluntary control of the autonomic nervous system, and there's definitely some emotional input. People who are stressed out sometimes have bowel problems and high heart rates, etc. So now we have I have a list here of some homeostatic imbalances of the autonomic nervous system. This is a homework assignment. So there's 3 listed here: hypertension, Raynaud's disease, autonomic dysreflexia. So your homework assignment is to just pick a disease that's or a homeostatic imbalance of the autonomic nervous system. It can be one of these 3, or it could be something else you're interested in. It just has to be an imbalance of the autonomic nervous system. And just in a simple paragraph, 3 to 4 sentences, describe what that imbalance is and what causes that imbalance. Okay, so that's the autonomic nervous system in a nutshell.